Sawadee Karp, hello and welcome to another video question and answer time with Victor Black. In today's video, a masterclass member asked me to talk about the subject of intra and post-workout nutrition. Fascinating subject, absolutely fascinating. The challenge with this conversation is always that it's one of those subjects that has the potential to run away on us in terms of the level of detail that we need for our goals. Okay, it's very, very easy to not cover enough detail and to dismiss this as a beginner. There's definitely value here for guys at the intermediate level. Absolutely good value. All right. But it's also true that you can go further and further and further into this subject to the point where you get to this point of diminishing returns where you're chasing literally sub-fractional outcomes, but there's a cost to it, a financial cost, and a cost in terms of time and effort and energy you expend into it. So I decided the best way to answer this question is to make a free primer video. This is going to be a free video. And its purpose is to talk at a high level about pre, intra, and post-workout nutritional practices. And then I'm going to break away and I'm going to have some video in the members only area that talks about what do I do for this practice, what are high level athletes pursue. So this is really very much my recommendation for beginners. This is where you should begin, and then I'll talk about under what circumstances do you need to step your game up to go to the next level. Let me begin by explaining where this fits into the scheme of things. So this is our nutritional pyramid. Most important things at the bottom. These are the heavy hitters of our world. All right, where we get the lion's share of our outcomes. Enhancement. Well, a lot of guys are here, fascinating subject, but you have to understand these things cannot be separated from each other. These are symbiotic relationships that coexist with each other. You cannot separate nutrition from enhancement. This is where today's subject lies, in what I call nutrient timing. It's about basically saying, okay, so we have these protein, fats, and carbs, these micronutrients, potentially even some performance-enhancing supplementation. How do we time it? How do we use it to our best effect? Okay, so quick primer before we move on. Basically what we're doing in the gym is trying to do this. This is muscle protein balance. Here's a pivot point where we have muscle synthesis on one end, creation of new muscle breakdown on the other end. This is where most people live, in a state of balance, where muscle breakdown equals muscle protein synthesis, and you do not progress. If you're not progressing, that's your state. So in other words, the muscle that you break down on a systemic level is basically equal to the muscle that you're creating, because every day you turn over about 300 grams, okay, of protein. This is 4.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, okay? And this is used for repairing tissues. We're constantly in a state of repairing our bodies, right? So basically you pull amino acids in from the bloodstream, and those amino acids are then involved in muscle protein synthesis. You create new lean tissue, but at the same time, you're constantly undergoing muscle breakdown. A catabolic state is not something we can completely remove. It's something that we can minimize or mitigate, right? So a level balance is no progress. When muscle breakdown, right, exceeds synthesis, you're in a catabolic state and you're going to lose muscle. What we're trying to do here is simply have synthesis to exceed breakdown by a small margin. It doesn't need to be that much. In order to grow a pound a month, you think about how much a day do you need. A few grams a day is all you need of imbalance. Just a couple of grams a day, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. That's how you build muscle. You don't build muscle by the pound, you build it by the gram. Okay. So let me talk about the two conditions that create muscle protein synthesis. One is the ingestion of amino acids. Essential amino acids will, just on their ingestion, stimulate muscle protein synthesis on a systemic level, on a body-wide level, and its purpose is to store amino acids. A lot of guys don't realize this, but we have the capacity to store fat as fat. Everyone knows that. We have the capacity to store carbohydrates as glycogen, predominantly in our muscles, but to a much lesser degree in our liver. And we have the capacity to store amino acids in our skeletal muscle mass. So when this process of muscle breakdown is occurring and you need amino acids, right, to repair tissue, repair cells, if you don't have the amino acids in your bloodstream, Guess where it's coming from? Coming from your skeletal muscle mass. Simple as that. So we know that if we ingest amino acids, and no one is going to dispute this, all right? This is universally accepted. The ingestion of amino acids in the right ratios causes a systemic increase in muscle protein synthesis, which results in the storage of amino acids. All right? Secondarily to that, all right, the mechanical stress from training, all right, causes a localized increase in muscle protein synthesis, right? And when you add them together, right, you get maximum potential outcome. You can't have full adaptation, right, from training unless you have the appropriate energy that you need and the amino acids that you need. And this is why we don't grow in a deficit. We don't grow in maintenance. We grow in surplus, right? You can grow marginally under these conditions, but to grow optimally, you need to have enough amino acids. You need to stimulate and then provide enough amino acids and energy to grow optimally. Okay. So just a quick visual here to show you, this is the percentage from baseline of an increase in muscle protein synthesis caused by resistance training alone, okay? And then the combination of nutrients ingested after resistance training. So you can see there's a cumulative or additive effect here. The two work together, although they are effectively separate things. This works systemically, this works locally, right? You can add them together. There's an additive effect, right? And this is where the historical viewpoint of basically saying, okay, so we take our protein, right, over the day, our protein needs, our macros, our fats, proteins, carbs, and we break them up over the day. This is the traditional model of nutrient timing, all right? But evenly spaced meals, 6, 7, 8, 9, some guys doing 10 meals. I will talk about that later in the video, right? But fundamentally, the right amount of protein, relatively even distributed over the course of the day, over 4 to 6 meals, is all that's required, okay? And then traditionally, the bro way of doing things was immediately following training, we had a protein shake. This was the old school way of looking at pre, intra, and post-workout nutrition. You basically just ate your meals, and after you trained, you had a protein shake. You had to have your protein shake within 30 minutes of training, otherwise you wouldn't grow any muscle, as I used to say. Obviously, that's complete bro science, but I'm going to explain this today. The methodology or the mindset or the thinking of the pre, intra, and post-workout nutrition is basically saying we do more than this. Well, what we do is we focus our nutritional efforts on a window of time around our training event, okay? And this window of time might be, let's say, 5 hours. So we have a block of time before the training event and a block of time after the training event. So somewhere in between here and here is probably where you guys want to operate. So is it fair to say that there's benefits to this model? Absolutely. Absolutely. But what you have to understand, though, and the reason this subject becomes complicated, is that whether there's benefits there that justify the return on investment in terms of time and money depends very much on who you are and what your goals are. All right. So there are certain people that this methodology of a nutritional focus around training is, you're crazy if you don't do it. You're nuts if you don't do it. Let me give you a couple of high-level examples of that. Anyone that's involved in a endurance sport needs to spend time on this, all right? Where the event itself is a multi-hour event, all right? Anyone that has a glycogen need that exceeds their body's capacity, in other words, 1, right? You need to spend time here, all right? There's value here for you, all right? Anybody who's at the opposite end of the spectrum, who just wants to basically lose 20 pounds and get a nice 6-pack for summer, honestly, this is all you need to do, all right? I will go back over this because this video is for you guys, all right? I will go back over this and explain to you what you need to do. And somewhere in the middle, and this is where it gets complicated, are bodybuilders. Excuse me. So absolute beginners. Do they need to fuss themselves about pre, intra, and post-workout nutrition? No. There's no return there for you. Endurance athletes, you're crazy, crazy if you don't invest time in understanding this domain. There's value here for you. Where it gets tricky are bodybuilders, right? So is there potential value for there? Maybe, maybe, and this is what I'm going to talk about in the follow-on videos. So today's video is just for the beginners, free content for the beginners. What do you need to do as a beginner? Right, this is what you need to do for workout nutrition. Firstly, what we need to understand is that when we train, right, when we go into the gym, there's two things that we're trying to be mindful of here. One is making sure that we have the energy requirements to get effective training done, right, before we commence our training. So like let's call it the pre-workout setup, as it were. And then there's going to be the post-workout leverage, right? So let's talk about the pre-workout before. So what you need to understand as a beginner is that when you train in the gym, and when you're doing high intensity training, like weight training or high intensity cardio training, there are three potential pathways of energy that you can utilize, right? The first is what we call ATP. This is kind of the immediate, rapid response burst of energy, basically, that their muscles can produce. But the challenge with this energy source is it just doesn't last very long. It literally lasts seconds. Boom, it's over, right? And this is, if anyone's interested, where creatine fits in, the supplementation creatine fits in. It can assist us with this regard. When we're doing weight training and a set lasts for a minute, usually, maybe most sets don't really last longer than a minute, but let's say that we exceed the capacity of ATP, right? And so we end up drawing energy from our glycogen stores, all right? The oxidation of free fatty acids just takes too long. The mobilization and oxidation of free fatty acids as an energy source is valid and viable for endurance type, things like aerobic activity. But for non-aerobic training, high intensity training in the gym, weight training, it's just too slow, all right? So regardless of whether you're doing a ketogenic low carbohydrate diet or not, right, you're using carbohydrates, you're using stored glycogen as your fuel source, okay? So what do we need to do to make sure that we have adequate glycogen stores before we train? I can tell you it's not here, right? It's not eating 2 bananas before you walk into the gym, because all those are going to do is sit in your belly, right, and wait to be digested as the blood is diverted away from your digestive tract and into your muscles as you train. And those bananas will be digested after you finish training, okay? Something that I admit, I used to do stuff like that. I used to go to the gym and it was like a religion for me. I'd have some fruit or something before I trained, right? It's like the glycogen that you're using for this training block, right? And as I said, even if you're doing ketogenic diet, you are using glycogen, right? You are not using fat to train with, right? Fat is just too slow to mobilize and oxidize for high intensity training. The glycogen that you use during this training block is basically placed there many, many, many hours before you train. Indeed, if you walk into the gym in an ideal condition, you should be fully fueled on glycogen. Your glycogen stores, everybody has a glycogen storage capacity. On average, that's about equivalent to 500 grams of carbohydrates. And you really don't use very much when you train, right? So where does that glycogen come from? It came from what you ate yesterday. That's where it comes from. It's not from the bananas that you ate in the way to the gym, right? So what you need to understand is if you want to set yourself up as a beginner for good training sessions, what you do 72 hours before you train matters. That's how you set yourself up for a good train. You walk into the gym with full glycogen storage, right? By making sure your nutrition is on point days before you train, right? It's just a continual process of I eat correctly, I fuel my glycogen stores, they're constantly brimmed up, they're constantly primed, they're ready to train. That's how you train at a beginner level pre-workout. Now, if you want to take a stimulant to provide you with a mental boost before you train, that's okay. That's also very questionable. There are very good arguments to say that the use of stimulants can mask recovery And so they can potentially hold you back. But I'll discuss that in another video. If you want to use a stimulant, a lot of guys like to use stimulants. Some guys do, some guys don't. There are stimulant-free pre-workouts available, fine. But that's not where, that's like a mental pick-me-up, as it were. Make you feel like you're ready to train. The true energy source for you in the gym is this. It's glycogen drawn from the glycogen stores in your muscle, and it is literally placed there days before you train. It's not something you do as you walk into the gym and you take some magic potion to help you train. That's not how this works. Okay. Now, when you leave, after your training session is complete, do I recommend that you ingest protein? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just a practical thing to do. But let me explain something first. When you train, you shouldn't train with a full belly. Okay. You need to eat, let's say 45 minutes to an hour and a half, whatever you're comfortable with before you train. And then you train, and let's say this is 45 minutes to an hour and a half long. This is average training durations for most guys. The fact is, when you train, it's time to eat. When you finish training, it's time to eat again. All right? There's no magic about, I've got to eat here. You ate here, let's say an hour before you trained, and you train for an hour. It's time to eat again. All right? You need to be eating. Space through the day. Now, whether or not you want to make this meal, right, post-training, a protein shake or not, and whether or not you want to use whey protein or beef protein or chicken protein, believe me, there are hydrolyzed chicken proteins, and they've been studied. I'll talk about that later on. If you want to use a liquid calorie whey protein intake at that point in time, fine. Why might not you do that? All right. The reason that you might not do that is depends on your goals at this time. If you're dieting, okay, then the ingestion of liquid calories, right, means that you miss out on volume of food. So when I'm dieting, when I'm getting ready for a show, I don't take protein shakes at all, period, because I bloody want to eat. I want my food on my plate so I can sit down and enjoy it, right? Might there be an argument that you could say, well, you can squeeze out some small benefit out of the slightly more rapid digestion of proteins in liquid form immediately following training? Absolutely fine. I'll agree with that. But you have to understand, when you're dieting, you're not growing, okay? Our goal when we're dieting is not growing. It's holding on to what we got, all right? So whether or not post-workout you have a protein shake or not is going to depend on where you are. If you're in maintenance, it doesn't really matter. If you're in diet, it doesn't really matter. There might be some small advantage to be had during a growth phase, agreed. And obviously during a growth phase, we have surplus calories that we can mess around with. But let me tell you, I'm 88 days away from a competition. I ain't giving up one of my meals for liquid calories at this point in time. I like food too much, and I hate being hungry. One of the things I hate about most guys' diet models is, God, dude, you're hungry all the time. I couldn't stand it. I'm never hungry because I plan my diets in sensible ways. For example, you're not growing. There's no benefit to rapid digestion of protein at that point in time. You need the protein. Is it going to matter? Is it really going to hurt if it takes another 20 minutes to get into your bloodstream? You have proteins in your you have amino acids in your bloodstream from this meal here, right? It's not like they're not present, right? Does it really matter? Not in times of deficit, it doesn't. Okay. So what I really want guys to understand in this thing is this concept of pre, intra, and post-workout nutrition isn't a simple, you hear these guys, yeah, you got to take this, you got to take that. Think, guys, think. Who are you? What's your budget? What are your goals? Where are you in your training block? And then you start to make intelligent, rational decisions about what you might do next based on what you know about where you're at. So if you're a guy who basically isn't in deficit, or is in deficit and isn't hungry, right? All you need to do is have like 4 to 6 evenly spaced meals during the day, right? One precedes training, okay, by an hour. One follows training in fairly short order, okay? You have a window of time, it's not 30 minutes. Go home, have a shower, have a meal, all right? Might you get some small, slender advantage by slamming a protein shake, immediately after and then going home and having a meal? Yeah, I'll wear that, no problem. But are you in surplus? Can you afford that? Okay, great. But if you're in maintenance, you're not going to do that because this is 2 meals effectively. Remember, protein shakes and carbohydrates, even in liquid form, have calories. That's a meal you're giving up. Okay? So the path that you choose is based on more than simply some guy saying you have to take this or you have to take that. That's just the mark of a beginner. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about in the next video is basically this. This is the concept of saying, okay, so we're more than beginners. We're prepared to make an investment of time and potentially money in clustering nutrients around our training window. All right. Again, who might do this? If you're a beginner, don't worry about it. There's no return on investment here for you. If you're an endurance athlete, you're mad if you don't watch this video. Mad. All right. There's value here for you. All right. If you're a bodybuilder, again, it's somewhat questionable about what the return is you're going to get. It's going to be very, very dependent upon you as the individual. What's your diet model? What's your current state of, are you hungry or not? Are you prepared to give up? Because remember, whatever you put in here, if we reduce our nutrition outside of this time window, right, we bring it down. Because remember we were up here, right, constant. If we reduce this so we can cluster at this point in time, remember these are our calories here, guys. Okay? Means you're going to be hungry down here. Okay? So any perceived benefit that you might think you pick up, is it worth being hungry? For me, I'll give you my answer in the next video. Might be obvious at this point in time, right? Me, adherence is more important than anything else. If doing stuff like this, right, gives me 1% to 3% better results, right, this is worth looking at. You need to spend some time looking at it because it's an easy pickup in terms of results. But let me tell you, if that potential 1 to 3% makes my life fucking misery down here because I'm fucking hungry, right? Screw that, right? And this is one of the reasons where I see guys that do one show and they'll go, I'll never compete again. Because they were given these types of models by people and they brutalized themselves at other parts of the day just to have these kind of enhanced nutritional windows around their training. Okay? It's a complicated subject, starts off really easy. I use the analogy of Goldilocks the other day, too soft, too hard. You have to find someone that's in the middle that's talking to you. And we can drill deeper and deeper and deeper and down into this as far as however deep you member guys want to go. I'm happy to take you there and to show you the details of it. But for most guys, most of the time, beginners, you don't need to go here. Endurance athletes, you're a fool if you don't look at this. Enhanced bodybuilders, amateur competition level, I'm being honest with you. If you're the kind of guy that hates dieting and you're always hungry, this might not be a great idea for you because you're going to be giving up your calories here. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to be talking about what I do, and we're going to be talking about what I recommend my clients do, and we're going to be talking about even more advanced strategies than that, the guys that basically are full-time professional athletes and what they potentially do. So that will be in the masterclass section. If you're not yet a member of the masterclass, please consider joining. This is the free content. These are the primers. If you want the real knowledge, it's $5 a week. You get to ask any questions you want to ask. I'll do my best to answer them. I'm going to be presenting content that I think you need to know. And just as importantly, any discussions or any questions that you want to drill down, you could basically, just keep sending your questions through to me. If you can afford one-on-one coaching, great. It's $25 a week. Fantastic. Sign up for it. I'm more than happy to work with you one-on-one. But if you can't afford $100 a month, all right, then pay $5 a week and get your questions answered in a credible, practical way. I hope you enjoyed today's video. That's it for pre, intra, and post-workout nutrition Primer 101. I'll talk to you at next Victor Black Masterclass video. Sawadee Khal.